is Read Japanese Literature. My name is Allison Fincher. Read Japanese Literature is a podcast about Japanese fiction and some of its best works. All the works we discuss are available in translation, so you can read along if you want, and you can find out more at readjapaneseliterature.com. I know I promised y'all an episode about works of Japanese literature adapted into films. That turned out to be biting off a bit more than I could chew, although I'm still doing research about the topic. Instead, I decided to turn to a topic I've been toying with since the Season 2 episode about sexlessness in Japanese fiction way back in February 2023, the cell phone novel. Allow me to provide a little warning. I had a lot of fun prepping this episode. I like to refer to myself as an elder millennial. I graduated from high school in 2003. I finished college in 2006. And while I was in college, I was a huge dork. So researching an episode about internet culture in the early aughts, even internet culture halfway across the world, has been a truly delightful walk down memory lane. While I've podcasted about books that I liked a lot more than cell phone novels, I'm not sure I've ever talked about a novel's context on this podcast that hit quite so close to home. The episode ended up being more of an ode to the early internet than I originally intended. And while we can do some serious cultural and literary commentary about cell phone novels and their kin, cell phone novels are inherently unserious works of fiction. I hope this episode will be as fun for you as it was for me. We're going to start today by explaining the Japanese cell phone novel, the Keitai Shousetsu. I'll provide some relevant background, including the history of serialized publishing in Japan and the rise of Japanese cell phone culture. We'll spend some time on the early 2000s internet culture, especially online message boards, because you have to know what an online message board is to understand today's focus text. Today's focus text is a novel called Train Man. It's attributed to Hitori Nakano. We'll talk about what I mean by attributed to instead of by, and it's translated into English by Bonnie Elliott. Even though today's episode is a mostly lighthearted romp, there are a couple of content warnings. Rape is unfortunately a trope in some romance novels, including cell phone novels, but not Train Man. We'll be talking about online misogyny. We won't be particularly delving into either topic. We'll also be mentioning, but not exploring in depth, some of the naughtier attractions of the otaku world. For all of these reasons, I've marked this episode as mature, even though, again, it's a pretty lighthearted episode. I'm going to start out today by explaining two important pieces of context for the rise of the cell phone novel in Japan. First, the history and legacy of serial publishing, and second, Japanese cell phone culture. Serial publishing is an important part of literary history all over the world. When something is published serially, you don't get the whole story in one complete book. You get it chapter by chapter, usually published in a magazine or a newspaper. If you've listened to Season 1, some of this will be a review. We covered it in Episode 10, Taisho Magazines and Akutagawa's Vision of Hell. News from the Republic of Letters, founded in France in 1684, is generally regarded as Europe's first literary magazine. The medium grew rapidly in the 19th century, especially as new printing technologies made printing cheaper. The first American literary magazines began publication in the early 1800s. Alongside literary magazines, many mid-19th century European and American newspapers published serial novels. For example, Charles Dickens's novels all appeared first as serials. There's a famous story about Americans waiting at Atlantic ports to find out what happened to the old curiosity shop's Little Nell after one of the novel's installments left her in a dangerous situation. Is little Nell alive? They're supposed to have yelled up at the passengers on boats. Serial storytelling is also part of the reason most of Dickens's novels are so long. In the 19th century, it was actually regarded as an embarrassment in much of Europe and the United States if an author wasn't published in a newspaper or a magazine first. According to an 1878 article in Scribner's magazine, quote, "Now it is the second or third-rate novelist who cannot get publication in a magazine. It is in the magazine that the best novelist always appears first." Gradually, the serial format began to spread to the rest of the world, beginning in economically developed South American nations like Argentina and Chile. In Japan, serial publishing became serious business during the Meiji and especially the Taisho periods. Most writers of Meiji and Taisho Japan began their careers publishing in magazines and newspapers. This includes Sou Sekinatsume, whom we discussed in an earlier episode. His I Am a Cat appeared in serial form in the journal Hototo Gisu, or Lesser Cuckoo. It was a journal dedicated to haiku. And Kokoro was published in serial form in the newspaper Asahi Shinbun from April to August 1914. Ryunosuke Akutagawa's career is also tied to literary magazines and newspapers. Today, though, serial publishing is mostly dead in the English-speaking world. Although I suppose you could consider some of the most popular novel series of the last few decades an exercise in serial publishing, too. Consider how many people are waiting with bated breath for the next installment of George Martin's Game of Thrones series. But serial storytelling has had a more enduring legacy in Japan. Yukio Mishima's magnum opus, The Sea of Fertility tetralogy, began as a monthly serial in 1965, long after the heyday of English-language serial storytelling. All 4 of Japan's largest daily newspapers still have a column dedicated to the Shinbun Shosetsu, or newspaper novel, again, a kind of serial novel. Most Shinbun Shosetsu are mysteries, romances, or slice-of-life stories, and all Akutagawa Prize winners first appear in literary journals, although not always as serials. So, in a way, when cell phone novels showed up in Japan in the early aughts, they were another iteration of a very familiar kind of storytelling in Japan. The Japanese were early adopters of cell phones. For example, the first commercial camera phone was released in 1999, a full 5 years before camera phones began to take off in the US. If you're young enough not to know what I mean by camera phone, I mean a dumb phone or a flip phone, a not smartphone that you could take a picture on. It was grainy and not great, but it was the first time you could instantly send a photograph to someone that wasn't with you. It was pretty dang cool. And cell phones, even dumb ones, were the first truly personal computers for many Japanese. It was common for one family to share a desktop or laptop. Other computer access was available at the neighborhood internet cafe. By 2007, about 70 million people in Japan used mobile phones every day as devices for web browsing. So these aren't just people using phones to make phone calls. These are people using phones as computers. At the time, the population of Japan was roughly 128 million, so that's more than half of the people living in Japan at a time when the median age in Japan was 43 years old. It's difficult to overstate just how online Japan was in comparison to the rest of the world. Consider that the overwhelming majority of Japanese speakers have always lived in Japan. Nevertheless, a full 37% of blog posts posted in the entire world in 2007 were written in Japanese. Couple an extremely online Japanese culture with a huge number of adults spending hours on the train commuting every day, needing something to do with their time, and you get cell phone novels. So what exactly is a cell phone novel? Cell phone novel is more or less a literal translation from the Japanese keitai shousetsu. The Japanese word for cell phone is keitai. The word shousetsu is usually translated as novel. It's a little more complicated than that. Even short stories can be shousetsu. But a more in-depth discussion of the definition of shousetsu is really outside of our scope today. Cell phone novels were, literally, written and consumed on cell phones. Again, not smartphones, but the old clicky dumb phones with actual physical buttons where you usually typed with your thumbs. The chapters from the earliest examples were usually only 70 to 100 words long because of character limits. How long could a text message or email you received on your phone be? Authors would release cell phone novels serially, 70 to 100 word chapter by 70 to 100 word chapter, and sometimes publishers would buy the rights for the most popular novels to print them in book form. Cell phone novels were a big deal in early aughts Japan. Published in 2002, Deep Love is generally regarded as Japan's first cell phone novel. It was by a man who called himself Yoshi. It sold 2.6 million copies as a physical book. It led not only to a manga adaptation, but also a TV series and a movie. In 2007, publishers printed physical copies of 98 cell phone novels. 5 out of Japan's 10 best-selling novels were originally cell phone novels that year. The top 3 were by debut authors and written on a cell phone. Publishers also started releasing cell phone novel-style adaptations of out-of-copyright classics by notable authors: Ryunosuke Akutagawa, Osamu Dazai, Souseki Natsume. Maho Island, which was the most popular cell phone novel posting site, carried more than 1 million titles by 2008. So that 98 novels that made it into print publication was really a tiny subset, the elite of the elite. Many of the 1 million novels on Maho Island were available for free. A 2008 New Yorker column by Dana Goodyear remains one of the most in-depth English-language sources on Japanese cell phone novels. It's called I Heart Novels, with a heart emoji. I was introduced to the novel by Dr. Alyssa Friedman at the University of Oregon, with whom I took an online survey course on modern Japanese literature a few summers ago. Dr. Friedman is also the one who introduced me to the cell phone novel. I'm grateful for what I learned in her class and how it has contributed to today's episode. In Goodyear's column, she outlines some of the key features of the prototypical cell phone novel. They claim to be autobiographical, or even have autobiographical roots. The authors usually write under pen names, sometimes adopting the personas of their protagonists. They're romance stories, including all that implies. Cell phone novels include tropes of rivals, love triangles, incurable diseases, pregnancy, miscarriage, abortion, rape. Many take place in the provinces outside of Tokyo and star middle and lower class heroes and heroines. Those heroes are often misunderstood bad boys or girls who don't toe the line on the way Japanese culture expects them to behave. At least to start. Sometimes a happy ending shows the hero and heroine reconciling themselves to cultural expectations. Like most romances written in the aughts, cell phone novels often reinforce gender norms. The woman suffers, often she's somehow rescued by the man. True love frequently prevails, often when the couple marries and has children. Japan's top-selling 2007 novel, Love Sky, is by an author calling herself Mika. It's true to the form. I'm not aware of a translation, so I don't think I'm spoiling a book to which most of my listeners have access. Freshman year, the heroine, named Mika, this is pseudo-autobiography, falls in love with a bad boy named Hiro. Hiro's ex-girlfriend talks a group of guys into gang-raping Mika. Mika gets pregnant with Hiro's child, but then Hiro dumps her. It turns out Hiro dumped Mika because he wanted to spare her the pain of watching him die of lymphoma. Allow me to reveal my own biases for just a moment. Men, and a lot of women, have felt free to dismiss women's writing for centuries because women often write about love and romance aren't serious subjects. And high literature definitely isn't supposed to have a happily ever after. That is rot. If you're hearing skepticism in my descriptions of cell phone novels or their plots, it's because I love romance. I just avoid these cheesy heteronormative setups because they break my feminist heart. In some of the tropes of cell phone novels, tropes they absolutely share with English language romances, are pretty gross. A grade school teacher wrote a scathing review of a 2005 cell phone novel called Koizora, calling it, quote, a crime of the media, because 12-year-old students had crushes on the male lead who first raped and then fell in love with the young heroine of the story. That novel was made into a film starring an actress who was a favorite among prepubescent girls. Anyway, cell phone novels weren't taken seriously, but they weren't really supposed to be. In many ways, that was part of the fun. But it's also clear that their frivolous reputation was pretty gendered. A lot of cell phone authors were young women. Most of the readers were young women or girls. A 2009 Mainichi Shimbun poll found that 80% of high school girls, 75% of middle school girls, and 23% of grade school girls had read a cell phone novel. And, as I mentioned, a lot of the stories were love stories. I'm a fan of where Banana Yoshimoto landed on cell phone novels. I think her opinion counts for a lot because she faced almost the same set of criticisms a decade earlier for her own work. Her novels were supposed to be too frivolous, too romantic, too youthful, and, although virtually no one actually said it aloud, too female. You can learn more about her reception among Japan's literary elite in the Season 1 episode, Banana and the Bubble. Banana Yoshimoto said of cell phone novels, quote, "Youth have their own kind of suffering, and I think that the cell phone novels became an outlet for their suffering. If cell phone novels act as some consolation, that is fine." Of course, Yoshimoto also added, quote, "I am personally not interested in them as novels." It's notable that the hype about cell phone novels was deployed in a sexist way to discredit Mieko Kawakami's 2007 Akutagawa win for Breasts and Eggs. You may already know that the novel for which Mieko Kawakami won the Akutagawa is different than the novel published in English as Breasts and Eggs. The English language Breasts and Eggs is actually what was published in Japanese as Natsu Monogatari. Mieko Kawakami revisited her Akutagawa-winning Chichi-Toran nearly a decade later, rewrote parts of it, wrote a second half, and that is what we have in English. Kawakami had a blog, so she was frequently dismissed as a writer of blog lit, but she didn't write Breasts and Eggs as blog lit or as a cell phone novel. In an October 2020 English language Twitter post, she explained, "Some people wrote that Breasts and Eggs was originally a blog, but that's not true. I have no idea where that rumor came from." I'll add that it's also obvious to anyone who takes the time to glance at any page at random from Breasts and Eggs that it's not blog lit. It's pretty clear to me that those rumors came from 2008 articles about Kawakami's Akutagawa win. One article in the UK's Independent is titled "Young Commuter Bloggers Snatch Japan's Literary Laurels." The author uses the term blog lit to describe breasts and eggs. It quotes noted misogynist and ultra-nationalist Tokyo mayor Shintaro Ishihara saying, quote, "The egocentric, self-absorbed rambling of the work is unpleasant and intolerable." Ishihara's credibility as a literary critic comes from his own 1955 Akutagawa win. It also quotes an English-language translator who is, I think, attempting to say something nice about Kawakami and her novel. Quote, "Kawakami's popularity is part of the phenomenon of confessional fiction of the chick lit variety, where the writer is very frank about sex and personal, especially family relationships." Sexism aside, cell phone novels still occupy an ambiguous place in Japanese literary history. I was especially struck by Goodman's interview of a Japanese cell phone novelist named Monet, who wrote 2007's 10th best-selling novel, Eternal Dream. Eternal Dream was ultimately accessed online 3 million times and sold 200,000 copies as a printed book. Sales netted Monet about $200,000 in 2007. But at least as of 2008, Monet wasn't exactly proud of her work. She had regrets she hadn't done more to protect her anonymity. She was hurt by the fact that she was treated as, quote, "this lame chick who's written one of those awful cell phone novels." You can notice there how the sexism has affected her. Still, she stood up for the fact that she is a writer. Quote, "People say these horrible things about cell phone novels, and I'm not sure they're mistaken. They say we're immature and incapable of writing a literate sentence. But I would say, so what? The fact we're producing it all is important." Cell phone novels never really took off in the Anglosphere. Technology is at least partially to blame. We English speakers never developed the skill with dumb phones that the Japanese had. If there was a breakout year for cell phone novels outside of Japan, it was 2007. And that's also the year Apple released the iPhone, a device much more suited for reading traditional novels on a larger screen. The printed English-language edition of Train Man is 400 pages long, but I can sum up the narrative for you in 4 sentences. It's the supposedly true story of a otaku who intervenes when a drunk man harasses several women on the Tokyo subway. The youngest woman sends him a thank you gift, and he panics. Being an otaku, he turns to 2channel for advice, and the ensuing events change his life. The novel is made up entirely of posts on 2channel. Now, if you aren't, like I am, an elder millennial dork, this description may leave you with a couple of questions. Namely, what is an otaku? And what the heck is 2channel? Otaku is easy, although the definition is a little different in Japan than it is in the Anglophone world. An otaku is an extreme enthusiast of something, usually anime, manga, video games, or computers. And note that in Japan, anime more or less means anything animated. What English speakers call anime is Nihon no anime, Japanese anime. Manga is any comic, but can even mean anything pop culture-y. Superman is manga. Even computer dorks who don't give a fig for Mobile Suit Gundam can be otaku because of their obsession with computers. The term originally had negative, sometimes extremely negative, connotations. That's no longer necessarily true, and wasn't necessarily true by the time Train Man takes place in 2004. In the English-speaking world, otaku usually means an enthusiast of Japanese anime, manga, or video games, but that's just not what it means in Japan. Sorry, y'all. Quick side note that Bonnie Elliott's 2006 translation of Train Man is into British English. She uses the term anorak for otaku. Anorak is just incredibly localized British slang when otaku is literally right there. Or maybe it wasn't. I can't quite remember. Otaku was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2007, so I suspect it was already widely in circulation in 2006. The use of anorak is really my only complaint about Elliott's translation, which otherwise feels very familiar to early aughts English language internet forum slang. So that's otaku. That leaves us with maybe a more obscure question. What is 2-channel? 2-channel, or ni chanaru, is one of the most popular forums in internet history. And please forgive me for the following digression, a definition of internet forum. Not only am I waxing nostalgic, it's also very relevant for Train Man. Think about a forum as an online message board or online bulletin board or online discussion platform. At least in the US, the most obvious 2025 offspring of internet forums are things like Reddit or maybe Discord, but culturally, it's really not the same. Individual conversations on internet forums are broken up into threads or topics. Generally speaking, one user can respond to a previous user's comments. On 2-channel, threads were limited to 1,000 posts. If you read Train Man, you'll notice the posts duplicated in the book are numbered, and the numbering starts over whenever it hits 1,000. Users can access a forum to post their own contributions or just to read them. Many forums today require posters to log in, but some, like 2-channel, allow users to post anonymously. Other users just follow along without contributing. In English language parlance today, those folks are called lurkers. Every once in a while in Train Man, someone will show up and say, "I've just been reading so far, but now..." Even today, you can really build a community or even make a life on certain internet message boards or their more contemporary equivalents. I'm a part of a Japanese literature Discord that makes me quite happy. There's a sense of camaraderie in shared interests. While about 2/3 of our posts are about Japanese literature, another third are things like pictures of our pets. But to truly understand what internet forums looked like in their heyday, you likely had to be there. These forums were full of really dumb, specialized slang, initialisms, abbreviated words, words that were smashed together. The technical term is portmanteaus. Words that gamers used amongst themselves, leet speak, and some words that English speakers adopted from manga. In English, words like noob, that's with 2 zeros, not 2 O's, pwn, the internets. It was the golden age of the emoticon. These were pre-emoji faces drawn with punctuation marks, like the classic : close parenthesis smiley face. And the ASCII art. These forums, especially 2-channel, were full of full-on pictures drawn with the 95 printable characters from the American Standard Code for Information Exchange, ASCII, ASCII. Essentially, art made from letters, numbers, and punctuation marks. There's a link to the ASCII art archive on the episode page. If you've never seen ASCII art, please check it out. My very Gen Alpha kid just discovered ASCII art, and it has been a delight. Now, for the really persnickety dorks out there, I should clarify that a lot of the art in Train Man isn't technically ASCII art. It's actually Shift.js art, because it's made from a superset of ASCII intended for Japanese users. Some of the art, for example, uses characters from one of the Japanese alphabets. The cover art for this episode uses the Japanese katakana for me. That means it's not ASCII art, but I realize this is deep in the weeds for most of my listeners. I have summarized the nature of English language internet forums, which is what Bonnie Elliott's translation replicates. Here's Alyssa Friedman's summary of the situation in Japanese. Homophones for Chinese characters. Long vowel sounds are shortened. Short ones are lengthened. Similar but incorrect characters are used. 2-word phrases are abbreviated into 2 syllables. It really is a specialized dialect. By 2007, 2chan really was, as it claimed to be, Japan's most popular online community. Its influence rivaled TV, radio, and magazines. It drew about 10 million visitors a day. That's almost 8% of the entire population of Japan. Now, there were some big problems with 2channel. Some of the biggest revolved around failures of moderation. That means no one stopped anyone from saying anything, even when those things were harmful or illegal. It was pretty easy to get away with being gross because almost everyone posted anonymously. We'll talk about Train Man the person or character in a minute, but I like a line of his talking about both the dirtiness of anonymity and the flip side, the beauty of it. Anonymity does allow posters to share their feelings, often feelings they have no other outlet for in their lives, and there is indeed something beautiful about that. But sometimes those feelings are pretty problematic, hateful, violent, misogynistic, racist. 2channel became notorious as a hotbed of far-right nationalism, including the kind of posts that are actually illegal under Japanese law, and of anti-Korean hate speech. There were even a couple of high-profile incidents of people announcing on 2channel that they had committed major crimes. Today, for various reasons that are way outside of the scope of a discussion of Japanese literature, 2channel is more or less defunct. It's hanging on to cultural relevance by a thread as 5channel, but has nothing like the influence it had 2 decades ago. So here's the TLDR of 2channel. That's the too long didn't read or summary for folks who aren't the kind of dorks who sometimes post or lurk on online message boards. The TLDR is that 2channel was a massively popular online community in Japan in the early 2000s. If you are the right kind of dork, you may wish to know that there is a relationship between 2channel and 4chan. I believe 2channel never got quite as gross as 4chan, but that's partially because 2channel died before it could get that gross. If you want to know more, you can go down that particular rabbit hole on your own. Train Man, or Densha Otoko, isn't a traditional novel. As I briefly mentioned ago, it's a series of posts from 2channel. Actually, the original text of Train Man took up more than 29,000 post threads. Although the printed version of the novel is edited, or maybe the right word is curated, the original composition included almost 30,000 posts. The threads were part of a chat within a chat within a chat. The 2channel forum was about video games. The board was called Doko Otoko. Doko means both single and poison, and Otoko means man. These guys considered themselves to be single because they were so unattractive to women, they were poison or poisonous. If you're getting incel or involuntary celibate vibes here, you're not wrong. You're just a little early. It wasn't really for almost another decade that incels really took on the resentment and violence that are now hallmarks of that internet subculture. If you read Train Man, you'll notice some of these kinds of themes pop up. Doko Otoko guys are also a few years before the rise of the dialogue about Japan's herbivore men that we discussed in that season 2 episode about sexlessness in Japanese fiction. On March 14th, 2004, an anonymous user showed up on Doko Otoko to tell a story. "This kind of stuff sounds too much like I'm making it up," he warned. Critics have pointed out that the whole story is a little fishy. For example, the 22-year-old Train Man claims to have a university degree and 3 years of professional experience. That's virtually impossible. There are even conspiracy theories that the story was cooked up by a TV studio, an ad agency, the then owner of 2 Channel, and maybe even the Japanese government that wanted dorks to start dating and having babies. Anyway, the poster explains that he was on his way home from Akihabara. Akihabara is Tokyo's otaku mecca for electronics and anime merch. On the train, he encountered a drunk 60-something man harassing a group of women. Already on page 5, this story presents some problems for a feminist reading. The women tell him, "Don't worry, we're fine," and try to calm the poster down, but he intervenes anyway. By this point, a woman just slightly older than the poster is being harassed too. Eventually, the police get involved. They all end up at the station filing a police report. And the poster is hailed as a hero by everyone involved. The policeman thanks him. The older women who were originally being harassed bow deeply to him and get his contact information. And then the younger woman asks for his contact information too. "I'd like to be able to return this favor soon." The next day, the poster returns, now calling himself Train Man. It's absolutely normal for an anonymous poster to give himself an alias like this. He describes himself as your basic Akihabara roaming techie. He's never had a girlfriend, and he is a self-proclaimed virgin. Again, these are the normal kinds of details guys share on forums like Doko Otoko. The younger woman from the train has sent him a thank you gift. Again, normal in Japan. But the gift is a pair of teacups from the upmarket brand Hermes. I had to look it up. That's apparently how you pronounce the brand, Hermes. I'm not an upmarket consumer. Thus, she comes to be known by the nickname Hermes. And while sending a thank you gift is normal in Japan, sending an extremely expensive pair of teacups is a little out of the ordinary. The otaku on Doko Otoko freak out and eagerly dish out advice for Train Man. He should definitely call her, using the phone number from the delivery waybill. Several people pipe up with, "I'm a girl," to make sure their opinions are heard. That's plausible. I had to do that myself in the day. It takes the folks in Doko Otoko 3 hours, but they eventually talk Train Man into calling Hermes. And because Train Man is an unconventional novel, the entire conversation is printed for the reader right there on the page, post by post. Depending on who's reading the novel, it's likely either relatable or academically interesting or nostalgic or maybe supremely annoying. But this method of printing a novel was very, very innovative. Personally, I found it nostalgic. Again, Bonnie Elliott did a remarkable job rendering English language early aughts internet slang with lines like, "Could check one of them local message boards. Techies must act as techies do and use da pooter for this." After Train Man works up his courage and calls Hermes, the rest of the novel consists of Train Man becoming more confident and self-assured with the help of his friends on Doko Otoko. The chapters are presented as missions that Train Man has to complete to achieve his happy ending with Hermes. With their advice, he gives himself a makeover. He spends several $100s to do it on clothes and seeing an actual hairstylist instead of a barber. He learns how to ask Hermes out on dates, and eventually he shares his feelings with Hermes. Anyone who has ever read a romantic light novel or watched the right kind of anime has probably noticed that working your way up to confessing, "I like you," is usually the climax of a basic romantic Japanese narrative. Each time Train Man goes out on a mission, he comes home late in the evening and shares the tale of what happened to him, usually taking several hours to get the full story typed up and posted. Each mission takes Train Man further from his Doko Otoko identity, so the other members of the forum joke that his successes are an attack against them. At the end of the novel, members of Doko Otoko even give Train Man a graduation certificate. He has surpassed Doko Otoko and now needs to move on to a thread for people who are in relationships. It fascinated me that the forum members themselves started taking on the role of storyteller pretty consciously. Sometimes the posters write their own elaborate dialogues between Train Man and Hermes. Sometimes they write dialogues as advice for how Train Man can talk to Hermes, but just as often they write them as exercises in how they hope Train Man's encounters with her will go. The posters are also self-aware that Train Man's story is proceeding the way a romantic narrative is supposed to go. Sounds like a film, one notes. Another says they can imagine the screenplay for Train and Hermes's wedding. Several share the stories with their girlfriends. By the time Doku Otoko members have been following the story for more than a month, one observes, quote, "We're headed into film and TV drama and novel territory here." Some of the other members of the forum are inspired by Train Man to change their own behavior. One goes to a fancy hairdresser for the first time in his life. Another breaks up with his girlfriend because she's taking him for granted and he finally has the confidence he can do better. Sadly, at least one girl on Doko Otoko is disempowered by Train Man's story. "I've already given up. I don't have a Mr. Train in my life. I suppose I'll keep fighting off the train pervs as usual." Since the story ended in May 2004, Train Man has become a book, a movie, 4 mangas, including a seinen manga for adult men and a shoujo manga for younger women, a TV series, a play, and a porno. The book was one of the first commercially successful books of the cell phone novel era published in an alternative format. It also resulted in self-help books like the Train Man Styling Bible. There was essentially an entire Train Man movement asserting that otaku could get girls if they spent their way out of looking dorky and were only otaku in private. The implication was that if otaku got girls, they should, of course, marry them and have babies and rescue Japan from its low birth rate problem. There were obviously many problems with this consumerist and heteronormative claim. Buy your way out of being a dork, marry and have babies instead of being yourself. I'm not going to give a full-on cultural critique today, but you can check out Alyssa Friedman's article listed on the episode page, or the RJL episode, Sexlessness in Japanese Fiction, for more information about the kinds of ideas floating around in Japan in the early 2000s. Many of them are still floating around today. Notably, the published book Train Man attracted a different audience than most novels written in text message formats, including cell phone novels. The earliest buyers of the novel Train Man were men. And this is interesting. Most of these men were 2-channel users who could have access to the content for free. When advertising successfully convinced readers how romantic the story was, women started to buy the book. But these women were typically a little older than the adolescent girls who normally picked up cell phone novels. So here's a question for you. Who ultimately wrote Train Man? The founder of 2-Channel, Hiroyuki Nishimura, is the one who granted the publication rights to the Japanese publisher. He holds the copyright, although Train Man, if he's real, should own a part of the copyright himself. It's pretty obvious to me Nishimura has no real claim on the Train Man narrative. As I mentioned, the novel is edited down from 30,000 posts to about 2,000. That work was done by a member of the forum. The member of the forum made the 2,000 post edited version available on a freestanding website. That means less than 7% of the original 2-channel version of Train Man made it into the definitive edition. What was left out? Some obscene examples of ASCII art, at least 4 alternative endings that were either ambiguous or unhappy, also some of the most obvious content that made Doko Otoko Doko Otoko, the edited version of Train Man has a few fleeting messages to some of the more pornographic interests Train Man shares with his fellow otaku, including porn magazines and what the translator has rendered sex simulator video games. I do appreciate that a fellow otaku takes the time to warn the virgin Train Man that porn may have left him with some unrealistic expectations of what sex is actually like. The member who did all of that editing and moved those 2,000 posts onto a freestanding website called himself, probably himself, Hitori Nakano. Nakano is presented as the family name. Nakano Hitori is a widely used phrase on 2channel. It's a play on words for Naka no Hitori, or one among the group, and the published novel is published under that name too. So I think there's our answer to who wrote Train Man. Train Man is written by everyone who joined the Doko Otoko forum in March, April, and May of 2004, and maybe also by no one at all. As one Doko Otoko poster notes, this thread is Train's history, but it's also mine. And that's what makes Train Man really unique. I am not going to claim you should read Japanese cell phone novels, but I will assert that anyone who is interested in modern Japanese literature should at least know what a cell phone novel is. Cell phone novels had a significant impact on Japanese publishing in the first decade of the 21st century. They changed the kinds of stories people were reading and how they read. And they changed the way Japanese critics talked about books. Today we've looked at Train Man by, sort of, Hitori Nakano, and translated by Bonnie Elliott. North Americans can buy most books I mention on the podcast from Read Japanese Literature's bookshop to support RJL. A special thank you to Patreon supporters. Patreon supporters get episodes early and bonus content for most episodes. They also receive weekly or bi-weekly newsletters that highlight new releases of translated Japanese fiction. You can join them by visiting patreon.com/readjapaneseliterature. We'd love to hear from you about the podcast. Reach us through Patreon, through the website, readjapaneseliterature.com, Blue Sky at readjapaneseliterature.com, Facebook through the link on the website, and YouTube /@readjapaneseliterature. A special thank you today to Dr. Alyssa Friedman for introducing me to the cell phone novel and to Train Man. Thank you to the Japanese literature communities on Blue Sky and Goodreads. And thank you as always to producer Kime for today's music, kimemusic.com.